Howdy, this is Jarls Stewart again with Dansk Viking here. On this episode of Jarls Commentary, I'm going to talk about something that is very near and dear to most reenactment groups, and that's called recruiting. Now, this video should be, taken into consideration after you decide exactly what type of group you're going to be, whether it be, inclusive, exclusive, all that sort of stuff. There are previous videos in this series about that go into a further detail on this fact. All I can say is, from my experience and what my organization has found to be a decent recruiting pool. Now, this is definitely not to say that everybody in these groups is the ideal recruit, even for us. This is not to say that these groups don't, contribute some of our members, because they do. But as a disclaimer, this has just been our experience. I'm definitely not accumulating a whole view of this, because very well one of our best recruiting pools of people may very well be the worst recruiting pools of people, depending on the area, or overall, and we just got incredibly lucky. Or one of the recruiting pools that we don't really get a whole lot from may actually be that may be the exception to the rule. Maybe everywhere else, they come in droves from that area, but this has just been our experience. Number one way that recruitment works, though, by and large, successful all around the board, from every account that I have ever said, is recruiting from within your own inner circles. So once you and somebody else that is not, was not your friend or family or something like that beforehand, your recruits are going to come from the inner circles of those people. People that have nothing to do with, necessarily any particular group, but they're just friends and families of current members. That is going to be probably about somewhere between 25 and 50% of your recruits. It's just going to come from personal relationships with your members. Boyfriends, girlfriends, friends, family. So, and even just raw acquaintances that they happen to meet while doing their reenactment activities. But aside from that, I would say that the biggest group that people within my organization identify with is heathens, pagans, and Wiccans. This is in large because it allows us to get in touch with a more religious experience than we are used to getting, just because Viking Age reenactment depicts a vastly heathen, pagan culture. So you're going to have a large pool from that. The next largest pool, I would have to say, is actually probably it's a tie between two different pools, primarily because they actually intermingle a lot, which is martial arts enthusiasts and metalheads. Kid you not. We get a lot of people who just like to watch them on a mark, like to watch Tier on stage, listen to their music and everything like that. And they just, want to get specifically the ones that want to know more about the history behind some of this music, which, and are willing to accept that, all the stereotypes of the Vikings was not real, and wanting to learn, what inspired this type of music. And then, of course, martial arts enthusiasts. We get a lot of martial arts enthusiasts, anywhere from, traditional martial arts like HEMA and, Eastern martial arts, all the way to weightlifting, powerlifting, people that are just, exercise buffs, all the way to the SCA and the Amp Guard, Dagger here, and everything like that. Now, the reason I lump all of these into one category is because as small as those niches are, they have, as small as those niches are, you have to accept the fact that, you're not going to be able to necessarily even recruit all that much at these. So I combine them together so that you can kind of not just, try and post things at, a couple of your local gyms and then, hey, I recruited. No, you have to post things at all of these local things. It's very different than like a music festival or anything like that. You got to look at exposure rates for recruiting. So, you have to look in these categories as how much effort do you put in for exposure. You don't get a whole lot of exposure at gyms. You really don't get a whole lot of exposure in SCA and LARP because, for the most part, I'm going to catch flack for this statement, but for the most part, the same people who want to do LARPing want to do reenactment and everything like that in some fashion, because realistically, when you're talking about just the combat systems and everything like that, people like to hit their friends with things. That's just what it is. When you're talking about, people liking to craft, whether it be LARP gear or historical things or somewhere in the middle, people like to craft. Generally, people who like to craft, LARPy things also like to craft historical reproduce things, and vice versa, because it's just the fact of making something with your hands is one of the things that defines some people. The fact of getting with your friends and doing some kind of combat simulation, whether it be a golf club with a layer of foam on it, or a blunted steel weapon. It's one of those things that's when you boil it down to it, it's a certain characteristic of a person that just wants to do that type of thing. Now, this, of course, there are exceptions, quite a bit of them. Some people who do buffing will not do steel weapons. They view it as unsafe and everything like that, which, can you blame them? Then some people who will do steel weapons will not do buffing. Buffing being, the foam on a hardcore weapons. And there are people in either who will not go to rattan, which the SCA uses. So, I'm more so talking about just what type of activity people would feel is fun. So, we have had a small measure of success in these main fields. The lowest group I would say that you are going to have success with out of all that I've mentioned in this, honestly, is the SCA. When you're doing a steel reenactment group, this is because, for multitude of reasons, and the SCA is the Society for Creative Anachronism, And anachronism means basically doing something that you know is making something to use during a reenactment that you know does not exist. So making a chair that looks medieval but you know it didn't exist and placing it there. There are various levels of anachronism and everything like that, such as for Viking Age reenactment, when you're doing a Gotland Viking kit, for all intents and purposes, if you're going basically 100% pure off of the ground, you're basically going to be running out there stark ass naked with a buttload of jewelry on you. So, you know, I just saw that on Facebook. I thought it was funny, so I figured I'd put it forward in the video. But that stands true for a lot of reenactment, and it follows through with that. So, you know, of course, you're going to be a little bit anachronistic and take some clothes from the nearest region and, you know, put it there, because, you know, you can't just run around naked when there's kids running around the festival. But in the SCA, back on topic, in the SCA, there are varying levels of authenticity standards between the local groups. Wildly, you know, different standards. And they all depict various different timelines and everything like that. So realistically, it is a crapshoot on whether you, as a reenactor who has a high standard of authenticity, even the lowest of standards within our community, is still considered a very high standard, you know, on average, when you're considering LARP, SCA, you know, just people who like to beat on each other type of stuff. But you're going to, you know, run into people who don't like being told that their stuff is not authentic to your standard, and that's going to make some people mad. Then on top of that, another reason why the SCA is not the greatest pool to recruit from is because the SCA has systems in place for you to advance along a certain path. I wasn't in the SCA for more than a month. Can't really attest to a whole lot of the requirements of it, but I've seen people who are my friends in the SCA who have spent, you know, a decade or so trying to become a knight. And that's a big deal for them. And if it takes that long, it's a big deal to me too. I just don't know the exact requirements behind it, so I can't attest more than saying, you know, great, I'm glad you achieved that big goal. But they don't necessarily want to leave the SCA, or don't really want to do anything else once they've achieved all of this that they have achieved in a previous organization. Because a lot of people are driven by their accomplishments, and it seems, you know, like they're starting over. And for some people, that's the drive to do it. But for others, you know, having them go from, you know, king of certain kingdom, or baron, or, you know, knight of this kingdom and everything like that, to basically being a raw Viking grunt within your Viking Age reenactment group, just isn't appealing. And there is nothing negative about that. You know, people like their achievements in general. I like my achievements. I would, you know, dislike joining a new thing on that level because, you know, I worked very hard to get where I am. So that's completely understandable. The SCA, you don't have to worry too much about, you know, safety nuts, because when they go out there, they're out there in full armor railing on each other, and people are getting hurt quite frequently. And with Viking Age steel reenactment, when you're doing Western style especially, serious injury is actually, you know, very rare. So when you don't get so many people from there, with LARPers and boffers, you get a lot more. Because they're used to the foam, and you are skipping rattan, you're skipping wood, everything like that, and going straight to steel. It's a big jump. And I'm not going to, dog on anybody for, looking at that and going, that doesn't seem safe. Because, let's be honest, what we do requires you to have a certain level of insanity. But back to the SCA being the lowest. The SCA also, you're talking about taking an organization that allows, thousands upon thousands of years of timeline, and all over the world for reenactment, and narrowing it down to the Viking Age. And if you are narrowing it down even more, you're narrowing it down to Viking Age Scandinavia. That's a very small portion of what the SCA covers. And the SCA, the people in the SCA are not necessarily going to want to do that. They would gladly do steel reenactment, but for the 16th century English. So the SCA is, I hate to say the worst recruiting pool, because realistically there are others that are way worse, but of this video, they are the least likely to produce recruits for your group because they are a well-established organization within this country, and they're pretty set in their ways, and it works for them. Congrats on that. So coming into the Viking scene, where we're relatively new in the States as far as becoming big and widely spread out instead of a few pockmarked groups throughout the US, we're starting to spread out and become a big deal. We are still nowhere near SCA size. And, that's just the thing on the SCA is, I don't want to say it's bad, because it's not. They enjoy what they're doing. Great. That makes it good. It's very chaotic in the sense of you never know what you're going to get, with a person from the SCA. They incorporate so many different people with so many different ideas on everything to do with reenactment. And, you've got the guy who will literally count the scratch marks on a button on his, gambeson, and put that on his gambeson based off of the historical find. And then you'll have the guy who literally made Black Panther look-alike armor. You'll have the guy who can't hardly cut it in, SCA combat, and then you'll have the guy who is the absolute master of it, and literally those could go either way on it. So when you talk to people who were SCA, you're going, that, because you don't want to steal people from another person's group, even if it's from SCA to reenactment. But there's a lot of former members of the SCA or SCA members who move to a new area and just don't have any group nearby that they can get to. But there are going to be people in that situation that you just never know what you're going to get when they say SCA. LARPers, boffers, generally pretty predictable here in the United States. And if you can, figure out the route down the path to recruiting them, great. They're hard to, because they're also from an organization. They're set in their ways and everything like that. The only thing is that if you find one that was a former LARPer, they are likely set in a very narrow road, unlike the SCA, which is like a giant yarn ball. So when you are recruiting, I will give some basic rules for recruiting. You do not want to do what is called sniping. Sniping is where you take a person from another group that is similar. Yes, LARP and SCA is similar to what we do, and take them away from that group. That's just bad PR. It's, yes, of course, it's up to the individual and everything like that, but it's still, something that leader has invested time and effort into that person, and here you are to, you know, try and get that person to do for you. It's just, you know, it's not good. You know, I'm not going to sit here and try and justify why it's not good. It just isn't. Because you know what? If somebody were to turn around and do it to you, you wouldn't like it. So that's enough to make it not good. When recruiting, you don't want to instantly start bashing people with authenticity stuff. It's not easy to be super authentic and be nice, because people are very set in their ways when they get to you, no matter what those ways are. And a lot of people have to be corrected on authenticity. So doing that correction is something that needs to be done very delicately. If somebody says, oh, well, I make chainmail, and you're just like, well, butted or riveted, and they're like, butted, you literally have to bite your tongue for a few minutes and think before you speak. Because if you just go out there and go, but it's not Viking, they're going to take it as, you fucking suck, you're the degenerate of society, and everything like that. So be gentle with your recruits until they kind of get the flow of authenticity. You don't want to make anything a pointed issue. You want to make it an overall, hey, it's cool you do butted. I like butted stuff the way it looks. The unfortunate aspect is that butted chainmail was not in the Viking Age, because due to lack of materials and how hard it was to create, they wanted something much stronger, so they riveted their mail. You can definitely, you know, make some pretty cool stuff. I like it. But for the group, butted chainmail is not allowed. Our authenticity standards don't allow it. We'll gladly help teach you how to make riveted mail, and that would actually help you produce, you know, good equipment for the group, and that would be super helpful, and also allow you to produce things that you can sell at the Viking festivals and get some money for yourself from these festivals, as well as sell your butted at some of the festivals that are, you know, not very historically accurate. Something like that. Of course, there's always going to be somebody who's going to be pissed off at you taking that time to think and explain about, you know, your standards. All you can do is try your hardest. Well, I've taken up enough of your guys' time. Please subscribe to my channel so that you can receive more updates. If you like my advice, please like this video and hit the little bell so that you get more notifications. I'm not sure why YouTube does it multiple ways, but hey, it is what it is, and I hope you guys have a good day.